Frank's going to start us off here with history. A lot of y'all have heard history about us, but this guy, being a graduate of Texas A&M, is probably the brightest guy that I know. And he's just a history that even I haven't heard everything, but he's going to talk about our grandparents and our grandfathers on Cumberland Island and how they got there, how we got into net making business. So he's got a lot to tell you. It's got a lot of families involved in the Fernandina area involved in this, black and white. The black families were very, very predominant back in the days, early days of shrimping here in the island. So, cousin, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay,
You can sit down, stand up, whatever you
I'm
want.
gonna stand up. I gotta get my notepad out here. When you get my age, your memory isn't as sharp as it used to be. So every now and then I gotta flip through this. Let's see, this is my wife's grocery list. That's not what I'm
You're in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, as Billy was saying, he and I are cousins. Our fathers were brothers. His father was Billy. My father was Frank. You'll see the picture of the two boys, my dad and Billy's father, Uncle Billy, right there when they were kids, holding the big redfish up. And that was right here at our grandfather's fish house and net shop here on Center Street, which would be about where Brett's restaurant is right now, if you know what that's at, okay? The building, of course, it's all gone and everything. And here is one of our relatives, Aunt Dot, my dad's sister, standing in front of the family business there. And this picture over here, when you get the chance to come up and take a look at it, this is Billy's father, Uncle Billy Burbank, our grandfather, Captain Bill, and my dad standing next to him, that's Frank Sr., and that's Billy, believe it or not, this guy right here. you see all that hair on his head. Same guy.
That baby's tough.
Yeah. Anyhow, basically to give you just a quick background on the fishing industry and everything here, Fernandina has always been a fishing town for commercial fishing. We weren't always this big, fabulous resort that you see right now. We were a town made up of working people that just worked on the ocean, in the waters, and just made their way off the land and the ocean and everything. We had shrimp industry, of course, was probably the most famous and what we're known for. But we also had 3 fleets of Menhaden fishing vessels working out of here, commonly called pogey fish. If you're a sports fisherman, you know what I'm talking about. If you're from up north, that's what they call bunkers up there. We call them pogies down here. It's the same fish. And it's used for fertilizer, animal food, and so forth. And also, we had a lot of people that were in the crab pot business. They went out and set the crab pots all around the island here in the waters, called crabs. But shrimping is really what we were known for more than anything else. And this all started way back in the turn of the 20th century. I'm talking like 1909, way back in there. And a lot of the first families are still here. For example, this gentleman on the second row, Captain David Cook, if I may point him out there. His family, and he is a shrimp boat captain. If you want to get the inside on how a shrimp boat works, he's a good man to talk to and everything. But anyhow, you had a lot of families here. We had the Hardy family, the Cooks, the Bennetts, the Scotts, the Burbanks, of course, the Wilder family, the Ennis family, the Church family, the Middletons, the Joneses, the Freemans, and I'm sorry if I missed anybody's family that's in the crowd. There were a lot of families, and that's what they did. They were fishermen. If they weren't fishing, they were working on the docks, they were in the net business or whatever, keeping the industry going. And again, this is the early 1900s when this all started. This is before World War I, okay? In fact, David's grandfather, Captain Dave, was one of the original pioneer shrimpers, as well as our grandfather, Captain Bill Burbank. And how he got into the net business is he had designed a net, and he was going out and had such good catches that everybody wanted him to build a net for them. So it got to the point where he had so many orders to build nets that he had to put his brother-in-law running the shrimp boat for him. And he went to work on the dock, right there, Center Street dock, making nets for everybody. But there were other people that were in the business, and people from Europe came over at that time. You read a lot about the Italian people that came here, notably some of the first families, the Tringallis, the Versagis, the Pesettas, the Litrico, Anthony Poli, I could go on and on. But these are people that immigrated mostly from southern Europe, the Mediterranean area. They had a lot of people from the island of Minorca off the Spanish coast in the Mediterranean. They came here. A lot of those guys have moved on down to St. Augustine. And these people here, you still see their relatives around here from time to time and everything. We had a lot of Portuguese here, namely people like Captain John Santos, his brother Kerosene Jack. These were all shrimpers. And they went out every day and they caught shrimp and brought them back. And they actually were sort of like the ancient Native Americans that followed the buffalo up and down the plains, always looking for new shrimping grounds, better shrimping. And as such, Fernandina expanded the shrimp industry from Fernandina down to other places like St. Augustine and up north like Thunderbolt, Georgia, up in that area. And this has all evolved over a period of time because in those days the boats were wooden, they were slower, they didn't have modern refrigeration and so forth. So they couldn't get too far away from the packing house to unload the fresh shrimp and get them to market. So when they started shrimping in St. Augustine, packing houses would pop up in St. Augustine, and same thing going north into Georgia. So they were always looking for shrimp, and in those days, it was a gradual evolution of shrimp boats going up the coast all the way to the Carolinas and on further south into Florida. Talking about some of the other people, just a little footnote for your own information there. We had people from Greece come over here, mainly the Kiliakos and Dionis family here. They were boat builders, and they built some of the finest wooden hull shrimp boats that ever sailed. And they did it right here in Fernandina, right on the dock here. We had people from Scotland, like Captain John Ferguson, who went on to build a fleet of 24 shrimp boats himself. Now his family, and then they moved over into the Gulf Coast, they're not here anymore. And another surprising thing I'll tell a lot of people, we actually had several Jewish families here in Fernandina, notably the Ludwigs, the Solomons, and these men were in the shrimp business as well. They went on to have big fleets of boats. They were truly pioneers in the business, and they explored other areas as well, Louisiana, Texas, and so forth, which I'll get into in just a minute. The main thing about the Jewish people, they were just regular shrimpers just like everybody else, and believe it or not, they ate fried fish, grits, and hush puppies just like all us Gentiles. It was everybody at that time, they were just a band of brothers. You can get the picture of how it was in the industry here and everything. And also, it goes without saying, there were a lot of black people in the business. Black shrimpers, black shrimp boat owners, captains, so forth. And names like Captain Earl Richo, right here in Fernandina, one of the best captains that ever just put on a shrimp boat. The Dove family, the Lucas family, the Frank family, and so forth. So the shrimping spread out up and down the East Coast, but the first real big move came over to the Gulf when they, when they moved to Louisiana. Now this would be like in the days of the Great Depression. I'm talking 1930 and so forth, between the two world wars. And they went over into Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, over in there. Morgan City, Louisiana became the epicenter of the shrimp industry at that time. And it was a boom town over there in the 1930s. And it seemed like everybody from the East Coast was over there. So they got everything started over there. Down into Texas, the same thing. And as they say, the rest is history. Later on, after the 30s, shrimp were discovered in Key West, Florida, and also down in Campeche, Mexico. Now this is back in the 50s, okay? So what happened, a lot of people moved their boats permanently over to the Gulf Coast. Even some of the guys in Texas and Morgan City came back to the Gulf Coast of Florida. and boats were going to Campeche, going to Tortugas, catching shrimp, and I mean, it was a boom. We've all read in our junior high school history about the gold rush in California, the 49ers. People all over the world going to California to get rich. Well, that's what happened in the shrimp business. People were going to the Gulf of Mexico, going to Campeche, Mexico, dry Tortugas off Key West, and catching shrimp. And I mean, it was some very lucrative shrimping back in those days. And this brings us up into the 1950s and 1960s. Now my family, my father was a net man, just like Billy's father, our grandfather. We moved to Tampa. And a lot of people say, well, what's Tampa, Florida, got to do with Fernandina Beach, Florida, you know? Well, it has a lot to do. Because Tampa, at that time, was arguably the largest commercial fishing port in the United States of America. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but Tampa had a fleet of approximately 200 shrimp boats in the 1950s and 60s. And the unique thing about it is that everybody that worked on the boats and around the boats and on the waterfront, they were all from back here on the East Coast. So it's like you took a magic wand, waved it, and picked up Fernandina and set it over in Tampa. And there were so many boats in Tampa, it expanded further. Fort Myers acquired a lot of boats there, big fleet of boats in Fort Myers, then on down into Key West and so forth. So everywhere you have a shrimping community, you have people whose descendants from Fernandina were the ones that got it started over there. I've been very fortunate to be able to travel all over the place, and I have run into people from Brownsville, Texas, all over Louisiana, everywhere, up in North Carolina, and they tell me, yeah, my grandfather was from Fernandina. They've never been here, but their ancestors were shrimpers that went over there and got that business started. So Fernandina has got a very unique history in getting the shrimp business going and everything. Let me look at my grocery list again here. Okay. Basically, just gives you an idea of what the shrimp industry was like, what Fernandina's part was, and what Fernandina's part it played in the overall history of the business. And Billy's going to talk a little bit about the nets and so forth and the technical part of it. And I think that after that they may have some questions. If you have some questions, we'll try to answer them when everybody's finished up there. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Billy and let him talk to you about the nets and a little bit about what he has going on here. And one other thing too, that just to throw it out there, shrimping business has had some rough times, and it's very rough right now. And it's not just the shrimpers here in Fernandina, it's not just the shrimpers in Texas. I read an article out of the Houston Chronicle the other day about how the Galveston shrimpers were really having a rough over there. It's not just shrimpers. It's the salmon fishermen in Kodiak, Alaska. It's the scallop fishermen in Wildwood, New Jersey. It's the poor guys that fish for clams up in Fort Clyde, Maine. And what's the problem? Two problems. Number one, foreign imports. It's killing the American fishermen. No matter what species you're fishing for, no matter where you're fishing out of. If it's Fernandina or if it's Point Judith, Rhode Island, same problem. The other thing besides the foreign imports, the cost of fuel. Some of these poor guys can't even make enough money to go fuel up the boat and go out. So the other day, I saw a lady in Publix, and she actually bought some shrimp that were caught in America. I want to go ahead and give that lady a hug. It was almost worth getting arrested. Just to thank her for supporting the American shrimper, because that's what put me in the unemployment line, was the foreign imports and everything. Okay, so it's just keep that in mind next time you're out shopping and everything. Please buy local shrimp. We love you for it. It's a fascinating industry. And by the way, the shrimp here on the East Coast, whether unloaded in Mayport, Fernandina, St. Mary's, Georgia, whatever, they're the best shrimp that they have. I mean,
I know because he looks like just a calm gentleman and all that, but he was a bull rider at Texas A&M. And he's been a captain. I mean, what's the tonnage, the license?
1,600 tons.
1,600 tons. He's cruised the ship all around the world. I mean, around the world. So, and he knows how to work a sextant. You don't have to have all the gadgets, GPSs and everything else. So he does. That's why he's here with me. This guy, when I need to know something, I ask him. What I want to talk about tonight is, was basically where we came from, and that's part of what Frank told us all about. Where we came from is a family of net makers. I myself, I never dreamed that this is what I would do. This is the only job I've ever had. I didn't think of that coming up. So I thought I was going to be some college football player or whatever, baseball player. That was where I was headed. That's what I thought. A biologist. I wanted to be a biologist. I wanted to be a Marine Patrol, but that wasn't in the foreplay. So anyway, I wound up being the son of a net maker, and I thought about writing a book, and I wrote it one day. I wrote it, and somebody said, "Billy, that's a great introduction." I thought I had the whole book written. I said, and I was just telling Miss Peggy Bulger, who this lady is really the reason I'm standing here right now as far as history goes. This lady's she interviewed me. One of her first interviews was in the net shop that was downtown, Fernandina Beach. And here's this young little curly-headed, frilly girl. She was doing her thing, getting everybody saying, don't say at, just like one of my best teachers in the world said, Billy, when you're speaking, do not say at, please. So anyway, I said, well, maybe I need to go to the stadium and just tell everybody about the book, and then I've written the book, and everybody will throw it away anyway. So anyway, I get the book out one time, that's it. She said, maybe a good idea. But anyway, what I wanted to say was, coming up as a net maker, we learned from a grandfather and a father, and Uncle Frank, the guy in the middle, that's his dad. He was probably one of the fastest net makers around. So he was left-handed, and I was right-handed. And I remember the day, coming up, sewing nets. Now, when we're sewing nets, it's like shadow boxing all day long, and not moving your hands this fast, cutting netting this fast, moving your hands to tie a knot all day long. And I'm feeling it right now. But the day his dad told me in the downtown shop one day, we were sitting there sewing a seam, and I'm sweating, he's sweating, we're racing. We're not telling each other, but we are doing it. And when I got that far I was that far ahead of him at the end. And I remember looking over and he called me Happy. He said, Happy, you're the best I ever seen. That set the precedence of who I became after that. You weren't going to beat me. Nobody. You still can't today. There's guys that say they can outshow me. They can't. They can't outshow me, and they're not until I'm dead. Well, anyway, so the long part of the whole story is, my grandfather backed out of the business at about 1957, so to speak. He went back to his home where he was building nets under his home for Standard Marine and everybody there. But my father incorporated Burbank Trawl Makers, Inc. in 1957. So I came along about the right time that it started booming. And so we had 18 employees. We had a lot of people, and these were guys who would go to school. We just say, hey, you need a job? Come on down, we'll show you how to do it. But we were making nets for West Africa, Central America, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, Trinidad, Brazil, Venezuela. I mean, you name it, we were making nets. Even in the Persian Gulf. Right after the Persian Gulf, we made nets for the government of Persia, and all that oil slick and everything. You're not going to catch any shrimp. Well, they caught a lot of shrimp. Something to do with the oil, I don't know. But they caught a lot of shrimp. We made nets for Vietnam. We made nets for Israel in the sports industry. So we made nets for all over the world, and that was one of my slogans that I said. We were net makers for the world, and that's what we still are today. And Also, the sun never sets on a Burbank net, because there's somebody pulling or hitting baseballs with a Burbank net somewhere around. So coming through those times when I started the sport net industry, which is in 1978, and we were still working under Standard Marine Hardware, the Hardy family. Miss Suzanne Hardy, Baker Hardy, wonderful family, great people to work with. Well, I could see the handwriting on the wall. I don't know how, but regulations with TEDs, okay? TEDs were coming up. That's like making us wear a seatbelt in the car too. This was just something added that we don't need, okay, that it needed. And so fuel prices were extremely high, getting in the late 70s and 80s, and regulations, closures being talked about. Some rock shrimp ground was closed because somebody ran over a piece of coal, and they don't grab their nets in that stuff, they would tear it to pieces. But somebody did a little bit, and so we shut some areas down. That's another story. But anyway, so we were making nets, 3,000 or more a year. One story I'll just tell you real quick. We even made a net for President Nixon when he was in office. When he had his family on Key Biscayne, we made a 750-foot net that they put on concrete pillars out in the ocean, so that when his family went to swim, nothing was getting them. No, the Navy SEALs would swim around, and this thing was tapered from the shore to a depth. And so, you guess who was paying for that? The Navy, U.S. Navy was paying for the net. And they bought 3 of them. And they had the 4th one getting made, and Watergate come out. So that ended the game. The Sharks can have them, whatever. So anyway, as that went on, we're still working with the Hardy families and all, and building shrimp nets for just about anybody and everybody. We started sport nets. A lot of people don't realize or recognize that. Also, I founded Burbank Sport Nets and worked the company, and then sold the company here in 2015. But also before that, Stanmar Sport Nets. The Hardy family, they loved the sport nets introduced into their business, but we were just a labor force. I was working under Burbank Sport Nets. That's the company that I started. My father said, it's yours. You started, you do it. So anyway, they did not want to go with the name Burbank. They wanted to keep it in the Hardy family, and also we went with Stanmar Sport Nets. So for up until 1999, that's what it was. Stanmar Sport Nets, deviated from Burbank Sport Nets. That's who we were making the nets. And I was doing a lot of it even in the garage at home. I mean, that's how it got started from there. It really expanded. So then after that time, I have retired, by the way, 3 years ago. They say I'm retired, I don't know. I'm not making any money. I'm not accepting any money. I'm not doing anything. I turned it all over to this young man, who Billy Burbank, Hunter Burbank, we call him the 4th. And there's the 5th right there. So that's where the 5th generation comes in. Well, anyway, I just wanted to let you know where we came from now, but a lot of people will have questions what is the shrimp industry now? Do we really have one? We're in Fernandina Beach, and you can't really tell what we got going on here, where we came from, what we did in Fernandina Beach. And back in the days, we had docks. We had the Trig Galley docks. We had Island Seafood had those big old boats tied up right across from us, and that's where Mr. Bill Bryant and Chris Bryant were. And then we had on down to where Brett's was, we had dock space for people to tie up. And even down to cooks. We had cook and cook and cooks and cooks. And there's some cooks. There's some cooks on the waterfront, okay? And so, just to give you an example, this is what Fernandina would look like today if you had a place to tie boats up. You say, no, they're all gone or whatever, but what happens is a lot of the boats are still in the Gulf. We're about 1/3 of the shrimp fleet that it used to be. Like there used to be about 8,000 boats in the Gulf by itself. We're not even close to that, both combined. But like say the East Coast, for example, these boats are catching shrimp all the way up to Virginia now. The waters have warmed up. I mean, they're catching white shrimp way up the line. But these are the boats that are catching the shrimp. This is the boat that we used to have. David Cook knows them and all. These are the wooden boats that in the past we've had in Fernandina. But this is the super trawlers. These are the big 105 foot boats that you just don't see. They're out there. These are $1 million boats. You don't see them because they go to sea, they catch, they go wherever they can get to unload the shrimp. And then they're back out. They don't have to wait on ice. Everybody's freezing the shrimp right on the boat. It's big, beautiful boats. A lot of money into these boats are still around. Some are in trouble right now because they don't have captains for them, because some would own these boats. They're not running them like David would run his own boat or whatever, but somebody would own 4 of them. You can't get no captains. You can't get crew for the boats. But these boats right now would come back into Fernandina Beach following the shrimp. The shrimp comes south when water starts to get colder, like in November. They're down around Cape Canaveral. They're still trying to catch shrimp down there. Well, they would come in here. A lot of South Carolina boats, Georgia boats would all come down here, and I'm going to say something funny to you, but they're going to come down here and catch Mayport shrimp. I'm going to just say this much, you know, they're East Coast shrimp is what we got. I wanted to show you a picture of what East Coast shrimp look like. Well, first of all, this is a happy shrimper right here. This is an hour and a half. This was last year. Wow. This was an hour and a half tow. He's towing his nets an hour and a half under the water. Okay, and 2 years ago, David can probably tell you, we were at least getting $3.50 a pound. You couldn't hardly get the shrimp away this past year or so with the fuel prices still high. So that hurt a lot of stuff going on. But this guy, very happy. He likes his Burbank nets. And so this is what would happen. These guys would come down and migrate and then come to Fernandina because we had a place to tie up. And we had places to unload, Island Seafood, places like that. And so this is, the industry is still there. We don't see it in Fernandina because we just don't have dockage. We don't have anything going on. We have one place that's peeling and deveining shrimp and whatever. You have to ride down there and catch the boats when they're in unloading. David's got a dock down there, which, we've got some activities, got some boats that are tied up in there. Some of them are old guys, and anybody that needs help or needs to be able to tie up, David will let them come into his property. So that's where we're at. Now Mayport, this is what I've heard, Mayport, Florida over there, by 2027, they've got funds, they've got enough money, they're fixing to redo all their shrimp docks. They're gonna really expand everything in front of Gerald Pack's place over there, Miss Becky's Seafood and all that over there. So this will be a place for a lot of boats to come into, which is not available now. But there are some people that have bought property, let's just say in Georgia, built these nice, expensive docks that you can drive a forklift out on. He'll bring 2 of these big steel hull boats into his home, butt to butt, tied up stern to stern, so to speak, and unload them from his house, charge him a percentage for unloading at his house, and then put them on the truck and then go. And so he makes a living doing that. So this past year, we haven't seen much activity here because they're catching shrimp in the Gulf and all that. I don't know, David, have you heard we're going to have a decent season this year?
It's hard to tell. It's a little bit around now.
Yeah, just still really don't know. We don't know. With everything going on, we don't know what the prices are. But this is just giving you an idea of kind of where we're at right now. A lot of the people that buy nets from me in the past and are now buying them from Hunter, and he's working out of one of the buildings, the old pokey plants, where I used to be and all that. Has my old employees that are in there still working with him. And I drop by every now and then. I don't get to say much, but I just drop by, see how they do. And I have sewed a few stitches for them. They appreciate that. But the thing about the future, well, let's just talk about this real quick, is, everybody says pond shrimp, imported shrimp, and we're getting in an uproar about all of this, what's going on. But let me just say this much, Cuz touched on it. We're right here in the best place in America. I don't think you could live Amelia Island is one of the most special places because it's in this little hub. We're protected from a lot of storms. We get some of those backdoor things that ain't very pretty. But as far as the major ones coming in and tearing us up, but we live where the most economically green, if you want to call them green or you want to call them organic shrimp that there could be. I mean, you can't get a better shrimp from the area that we're at. You ain't got to buy an imported shrimp unless, even you can get this shrimp for the price of these imported shrimp. Now the guy that's importing them is not paying that big price. He's importing them in. But I want to clear this up, is this shrimp should be worth 10 times what it is because of what it is. To me, if I was going to brand this shrimp that came off the East Coast, I'm not talking about Mayport shrimp, I'm talking about the East Coast of the United States, it would be white gold. That's what I would call them, white gold. That's, if I was going to sell Donald Trump, it would be a $75 for a little 5-pound box with some big white gold. And they would buy them because they know the quality and the value of them. Here's another thing they're doing. They're out, when they IQF them, they get rid of the ice crystals and stuff that form in when you just regularly freeze a brine shrimp. Brine is salt on the boat where you dump the shrimp in before you put them into the freezer to help speed up the process, which now when they nitrogen freeze them or whatever, they're blasted, whatever, this seals the moisture into them with no ice crystals, so they maintain their waterway, because that's one of the problems of today, trying to keep quality shrimp to the consumers. There was a time where the freezing was a little bit shaky from what it is now. You would brine the shrimp in big bags with the heads on, brine them up, throw them in the freezer. That's not a very pretty product for what we do with it. Now, if you put it into things or cook it different ways, maybe, processing it into something different. But the ice shrimp that we used to get when Bill was in business, David was back in the business, and you need some fresh shrimp and some nice flounders, and you make a little trade and they bring you the best that there is. They just came out that day, they're almost still kicking. That was some of the best shrimp. But here's the deal. The deal is, as far as imports goes, there's a place for imports, because we cannot, in a wild-caught industry, support the people that need to eat shrimp or want to eat shrimp. But the problem is we're intermixing, in my opinion, we're bringing in shrimp, which could be green labeled shrimp from a pond. Green means the best. They're not hurting anything in the environment. They're not putting any chemicals that's going to kill you or me or anybody else or a bug or anything else. Then you've got yellow, which, okay, these are all from Indonesia companies, China, Philippines, you just name it, and that's where they're coming from. And then you have red. Okay, red is, you don't want to buy this shrimp for nothing. These are usually white-legged shrimp. You can tell where they come from. They got white legs. Our shrimp are red-legged. They move, they paddle in the water, they're strong swimmers. But what happens is those shrimp are brought in and sold on the market for not much lower than what you can get a wild-caught shrimp for. So we're mixing the things up. You're eating something you shouldn't be eating at all. And you should be paying a little bit more if you're going to buy the Wagyu, or where do you call Ragu? What do you call that steak? Hunter's going to get on to me about that, because I don't know. But I mean, what I'm saying is, I'm just telling you that a wild-caught shrimp, if you had any idea what it costs to catch 1 pound, when you look at what the boat costs and the fuel and the gear that goes on them today, it's astronomical. It's like everybody's house. It's gone through the roof. And the imports and everything is just tearing that industry up. But here's another thing that's hurting the industry too, is the fact that there's nobody, David Cook is not teaching anybody how to run a boat, captain a boat. Frank's not. I'm not teaching very many people other than my son and a grandson, who's asleep right now, but to make nets or whatever. So we're at an era right now that part of it might go away, but it'll still go on, because God, He made these shrimp right. Why? Because the eggs can stay dormant for over 7 years, this white shrimp we're talking about. They lay their eggs out in the ocean, and then they come in as little old bitty cyst larvae. As there's any biologists in here, they don't know what I'm talking about, but then they come back with the tides into the estuaries, and then that's where they grow up, in the grasses and all that. Now, one female shrimp lays 1 million eggs, okay? 1 million eggs, okay? They can live 14 months, is what they say, and I'm just talking about what they say. And but the longevity is probably around 7 or 8 months. Okay, and you know, here's the thing. Now, David will tell you, you're shrimping, and here comes April. Okay, the beaches are closed, and they're closed for other reasons too. But what we call the inside waters are closed to like June the 1st. David, is that still the norm in Florida? It's closed till then. But outside of that, where the female shrimp go to lay their eggs and all, we have what we call a roe shrimp season. I've always argued that, you know, if we could figure out a way to make some money between that time to not catch one female shrimp, we're going to catch them on into the summer. They're still around, but how many more are going to be developed? I'm just not an advocate of catching anything that's laying eggs. I don't care if it's fish or whatever. You just, why? I mean, you're trying to keep them going. Quickly, I'm going to get to, because I'm going to be cut off here, but I want to get to this TED. This is one that I came up with in about 2007, I'm thinking it is. And it's been around, the idea of it. I've worked with National Marine Fisheries Service and a lot of agencies from Texas into Florida for a number of years. Back in the 70s, 80s, David Cook has two pulling gear, new gear, trying to find a way to get rid of sea turtles, which was an incidental catch. Well, this model right here, what makes this model unique is it's a fixed angle. And you see this little green turtle, which Wood says, that's not like that turtle right there, and I know it is. But this is the only turtle I can get my hands on right now. But being this, the reason I made this fixed angle going out the top, for one, the turtle wants to go out the top. National Marine Fisheries Service had a TED built way back when, but the problem was it was as big as this area right here, each one of them. And they were starting to pull 4 nets. 2 nets, you could get away with these 2 things, but they were out the top, they had a trap door on them, and so we weren't loose shrimp, but there's some things that have changed since then. All right, so it's on a fixed angle. Why a fixed angle? Because if this angle is off, if a Coast Guard or Marine Patrol come to your boat and they've got just a little old $10 roofing protractor, this angle has to be a certain degrees, 45 to no more than 55. And it's just hanging up in the, they hang it up in the boat and they measure it. And it's rocking and they're going, oh, this 10 ain't right. $10,000 fine. And you got 4 nets, so add it up. I mean, so I just said, and then there was a time where they put it all off on the shrimper because he's the one alternate, whatever. I make it, it's made a certain way. Well, then they put it back on the net man because they were asking the net man, please stand it up a little bit because when I'm pulling my tongue nets, I lay it over a little bit. Well, shrimp were going out the bottom and they were losing shrimp. So we solved that with this particular TED, and we also solved a lot of bycatch, a lot of small fish, sharks. That's why we have a lot more sharks too, by the way, because I just wanted to show you this. The bars are a lot closer together. So you can see this little turtle. We don't catch anything that's really smaller than this because they stay on the top when they're laid and they go out to the sawgrass grass offshore out there and all. But this is for large turtles. Well, you can see how big this flap is right here and how big it can expand to let a large turtle out of it. Well, this flap does this when it's being towed under the water. This is where it attaches to the net, right here. The big parachute of death, some people call it, goes right here in front. And so the water's flowing through here. The shrimp go through the bars into those big bags that you saw with the guy with the big bags of shrimp. And then when anything large, sharks, anything, turtles, come through, these flaps split, separate, it comes out, it goes out, and this goes back down to keep them from losing shrimp. But here's what we found out. take this flap off, reinforce it with rope around here. No flap whatsoever on here, it loses no shrimp whatsoever. None. So we've got a lot of guys that are pulling this now. So this even makes them more effective for getting rid of stuff. You can't see it here right now, but you can see this split flap. The guy has them rolled back on the side. He has them kind of rolled back. And so he's pulling these Teds without any flap on them. And you couldn't talk them into doing it any other way now. So that just goes to show you, we've come as close as we possibly can to grading and catching only shrimp. And I'm gonna show you a real quick picture. This was before. This is not this Ted that I'm showing you. This is a catch of shrimp that was on the back deck. But now you see stingrays, you see other fish. Now these are not your red bass and trout, and everybody thinks that these shrimpers are catching. They just incidentally don't do that where they drag for shrimp. But here's what you get once you put a Ted like this in. You get you don't see much. You don't see much fish. You don't see much of anything in there. Pretty much graded out shrimp. Now I mean, you get areas where there's small fish that'll go through, but without any flap on it, that fish gets in there behind these grids, and the water pressure is kind of in his face a little bit, so he'll swim out. Then they push each other out, so you get rid of a lot more fish that way. And this is another one where you see just a little bit of stuff can slip through the cracks, but it's just a lot cleaner shrimp than what we used to have. This is a picture of royal red shrimp from offshore. These are caught in the Gulf. Now this is about a 4-hour tow. The reason they drag that long out there, because it takes a long time to get a mile or more of cable down to get the net onto the depth, the floor of where they're dragging. And this takes some real good seamanship and captains, because you've got a 12-knot current running, and whether you're dragging with it or against it. If you're dragging with it and you hang up, let's just say you get hung on the bottom and you got 12 knots of current going that way, and you're in a boat trying to make it, it's really, we've lost some good friends out there in some of this stuff doing this. And I've been out there myself on fire, 90 miles due east of Daytona in a boat. David Cook probably remembers that. Miss Kathy, whether it was that double deck boat. I stayed a net maker after all that. and then real quick, we're going to probably go through the questions, but if you guys want to know, these Teds do they eliminate a lot of small sharks that used to get drowned in nets. Okay, they do. It's just they're in there eating everything that the shrimp net's trying to catch. But when you don't catch them and all, you get, this is a typical day on a shrimp boat out there, and they're pulling their nets up. This keeps shrimp net makers in business, because the materials, like this material here, is just getting chewed to smithereens. I mean, these sharks will bite anything and everything that's in there. And a lot of these nets, when they pick up their bags and their Teds, there's a lot of nets still draped in the water. Well, I've designed nets now that don't do that. I want the nets out of the water. So while they're laying in the water, the sharks are just coming up, bang, bang, just biting it up. And I'm gonna tell you, David Cook brought me a net many years ago one time, and I'm telling you, there was holes holding hands. There was hardly anything that wasn't a hole. And he said, "You can have that back for me this afternoon," and I appreciate it. So, just real quick, this is just one picture. You come up here and bum around these things, but this is me and a good friend, Jim Dickey, who was a captain from St. Mary's, the Dickey family, great guys. This guy, we love each other like we're brothers. But he come over one day, and I made him thread the needle, which is, this is what a threaded needle looks like. This is what we sew. Y'all can look at some of this webbing and stuff that we got on the table here. But anyway, we're just in the shop, and this was probably before I retired. This was just a picture, not long ago, 3 years ago. So, and then real quickly, well, this is a knife imported from Sweden. Now this might be a knife Frank used back in the day, but it's worn down a little bit. But these are the knives that we use to cut the material. We'll get a bolt of cloth, I'll get the pattern figured out of what I want, how many meshes, and what I want to taper it on, and I cut it out, and then we sew it together with the needles. And my little turtle guy over here that's going to be sad he missed the turtle is Mr. Woods. He's the 5th generation. Hunter started his company. He didn't know he was going to be in that business either. You know what I mean? I thought he was going to be in the major leagues, but he said, I don't want to play no more, Dad. I've been playing for you. Okay, all right. So that's another lifelong story. Read your child's book. Don't write it. Okay, I was writing it, and I'm just saying read it. Okay, there's a lot of cases like that. Let them be what they want to be. He's turned out to be a phenomenal dad. And this guy, being the 5th generation, left-handed, we got one problem in the family. His mama says, left-handed quarterback for Georgia. I don't know. I don't know, but he's a good little athlete, good fisherman, and all that. So anyway, to end it real quick, so you guys got any questions from me or Frank, we appreciate it. And except for you, Rich, hold on just a minute. But I want to just talk about the Bible and Jesus just 1 minute right now, because back in the day, when Jesus was looking for his disciples and all, he went to these lowly fishermen. They're all on the beaches, and who were they, cuz? You were telling me. You remember who they were?
Yes, sir, I sure do.
Andrew and all.
Peter, James, and John. We all know it in the Gospels and everything. Jesus was walking on the shore, and Deacon Brian can tell you more about that than I can. But he was walking on the shore, and he said, "I want to make you fishers of men." And what they were doing, all 3 of them and their father Zebedee, they were mending their nets. I know if you've read that Bible, you've seen that phrase many times. So the fishermen were mending their nets. Same thing they were doing back then 2,000 years ago. It's the same thing Billy does. Can I use the needle?
Yes.
Show my needle.
Yes.
It's the same thing that Billy does every day. This is the tools, the needle. Back then, of course, it was some kind of bone, like a fish bone or something, or made out of wood. But it was done by hand. And they were doing this all day long, mending holes and everything on their nets. So.
And I wanted to bring into something about that while I brought it up. Because the shrimpers today are just like they were in Jesus' time, 2,000 years ago. They were complaining because they couldn't catch anything. Jesus walked up to them and told them to put their nets back on. No, we done been out there all night. There's no way. And so the fishermen today do the same thing. And I'm telling them, my nets will catch. You just got to put them in some shrimp. So instead of 153 fish, we're looking for 153,000 pounds. Okay. So anyway, that's we could talk forever. If I get a stadium book, y'all want to hear the book, come over here. I'll tell you about it. I got one more thing before the questions start. This was in the museum and all, but it's not in the museum anymore. It just tells a little bit about my father, the history and all that. And it says that we only had 5 siblings, and I just wanted y'all to know that that is not correct. That's a misprint, because the 6th sits right here, and this is the last of us. This Burbank gang, Effie was 99 years old. Her secret to that 99 years was walking the beach barefooted every day, because you get the continuity back. You're not blocking it with rubber shoes or whatever, but your feet have to touch that ground every day. And I believe it. She died not of cancer or anything else. She says, I said, Nanny, just think, just 2 more months, you're going to be 100 years old. She said, why the hell I want to be 100 years old? She said, I done seen everything. I've seen it all. So anyway, that's the end of it, guys. Y'all got any questions? All right, Rich, come on.
I asked you 2. I asked you 2 questions.
Okay, 2. Yes.
Okay, tell me, of your business, you have net making and sports related, true?
Right.
What percentage is nets, what percentage is sports?
Well, back in the day when I started Sportnet,
Now, today.
well, today you can make it whatever you want, but Sportnet still rules right now. Yeah, because for one, we're not exporting like we used to. See, we're getting into some tariff stuff now, but the thing about it is, if I was gonna make a net from the United States back to Guatemala or El Salvador, 80% tariff is what their country would charge that customer to bring a US made net back into the country. So we had to kind of swirl it around and make a net, but make it not look like a completed net, just look like some materials to get the costs down, to help them. And I mean, I spent some time down there in the 80s, which if you've never been in third world countries like that, it's pretty rough.
So what was, just look at the sports world side of it, okay?
Right.
What's the most lucrative? Is it football, soccer, baseball, XYZ?
That, you know, there's all kind of models of sport net companies out there that sell everything. A lot of it's imported, copied, I guess, from what I brought to the industry years ago. I pride myself on some new designs that we got from the Japanese. I had coaches that coached over there in Japan and came back, and we built products that they're using because they're very sharp. They're all about efficiencies of everything. And so then there's a lot of people that's copied all of that, and it can be as lucrative as you want. If you got a big backer, you can do whatever you want to do. But if you're small net makers like we are comfortable making you a product in a net that we will guarantee 100%.
Sports is more lucrative than nets.
Than shrimp nets.
You agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
Absolutely, but and let me just put it this way. The average net being pulled out of something made out of this material here, which is called Dyneema or Ultracross. This is very light but very strong. That's what we're using in the major league stadiums now, so you can see the game. It's a lot bigger mesh than this. This is a small for shrimp, but the squares are bigger, but you can actually see the game without looking through chain link fence or trying to look through this to see the game. So that was a game changer. I introduced that back in the 80s to the White Sox. University of Florida, my father was just a Gator from day one, and that's who we gave everything to start that sport net industry. That's where it rocketed, just word of mouth. And then my good friend Dusty Rhodes, that coached at UNF for 23 years, that's another thing. Every product he had was donated by me, and everybody from Ohio and everywhere would come down and watch him play and say, I want that. So that's how we got started there. But like I say, you know, you can look for financial backing and go as big as you really want to go. But when you're like my family is, and I know my son is, you enjoy your family, you enjoy your time, you enjoy Sunday off to go to church. God gives you just enough. You just work with your hands. You're working with your hands, and it's a comfortable, good living. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Frank and you, Bill, and also, David, because I think we have right in the room, like, the epitome of what the shrimping industry is today. Oh, that's my phone. And I want to say that I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the Wagyu beef. Because if people don't know the difference between, you go to Harris Teeter and you get like a big old bag of Argentina shrimp and whatever it's been.
And that's the one you don't want.
No, I know. Everybody thinks it's only in China where you get like poison shrimp. But anyway, it's somehow, if we could think about it, because we're talking about the future of the shrimping industry here, I think we all know that there's a difference in the shrimp.
Well,
and we've got to get the word out.
Well, they have now. They've got DNA test kits that if somebody really wanted to do something for universities, is you buy these and donate them to the biology classes like at UNF, JU, wherever. Because when these young students go out to eat, it don't take long to test that shrimp that they say, did this come from the United States? Oh yeah. Wild caught, yeah. Gonna tell them in a minute, 90-something, 95, 96% is false, okay? And it's the reason being is just because, for one, you can't take and each boat can't market it all. You got some guys like Vogelsong, a guy that is a customer of mine. And I told him years ago, I said, you've got to brand your own shrimp, you got to sell it online, whatever. He freezes them, nitrogen freezes them on the boat, IQF, good product, catches the royal ribs, that royal rib catches off his boat. So you can do that, but the average common guy just ain't gonna do that. So what I push for, first of all, is if anybody's hearing this today, they better be conscious of what I said about red, yellow, or green, yellow, and red. Because you know, the people in these countries that are selling these shrimp that I call not edible in our country, they're not eating that. They won't eat it. China refused the shrimp from Ecuador in the United States, accepted them. But here's the deal. They do have good pond-raised shrimp. I mean, these are not people that don't care, don't know, but they're the ones eating them. But it's like our wild-caught shrimp. You can't supply everybody. So they'll send this stuff over there because you're going to pay for it. You're going to buy it. So in my opinion, it's just this wild-caught shrimp needs to be marketed for the East Coast. And if it's brought into one hub, if there's somebody out there with enough money that wants to live a life of leaving a legend or whatever, you unify this much of it, you can sell this to anybody and everybody. In Meade Island, in my opinion, if they rebuilt their docks back and we quit wasting money on everything else, rebuild the docks back, put a packing house. They've already got property they own where there's fuel docks right there. They can sell fuel. You know, there's ways to get the wild-caught shrimp out, and they could sell it. You know, somebody else can market it. And so, yes, sir.
Yeah, so if you want to buy the local shrimp, where do you go to buy it to know that that's what you're buying?
Talk to the guy right here behind us raising his hand.
Adam Shrimp, we actually have a brewer license. You know, I'll say buy shrimp's the best because I think it's the best. We catch it right here in the river. They're fresh, never frozen. They're Amelia Island, Fernandina shrimp. I will just say, if you can get closest to the boat, you know, he's talking about the docks out in Mayport, he's talking about the docks here in Fernandina. If you can get to a point where you can find what boat they came from, that's going to be the best shrimp. If you want Fernandina shrimp, you know, there's very few boats in Fernandina doing like ice boats. There's no place, like you were saying, that for infrastructure to drop off here. You know, my family, we're able to sell it out of our house at the end of Chester Road, but we're very, very special to have the area that we have, the land that we have on the river. You know, my family's been blessed with everything. You know, get closest to the boat as you can.
How do we get you?
I
know everybody's thinking that.
Starting
Chester
June
Road.
2nd. So as he was talking about, starting June 2nd, we're allowed to shrimp again, and we're going to be absolutely busy. My grandfather was the Grand Marshal for Shrimp Festival, so we're going to be a little busy for the first bit. Hopefully we'll catch some brown shrimp.
Be
He and
sure
I
to
are
tell
supposed to ride
them
it.
your name, because you've got another competitor right next to you.
Oh, I'm not going into that.
That's what I'm telling you, because I know, but make sure that it's, what is it, Mike
You're
Shrimp?
looking for Adam Shrimp, fresh off the boat on Facebook. It's got our address, phone number, it's my
Adam
grandfather's house number, so don't call
Yeah,
at 9
it's
o'clock.
called Mike Shrimp.
Yeah,
Is it
and
called
then
Mike
as you're going
Shrimp?
down Chester Road, it turns to Dirt Road. We are the first place to sell shrimp. It's white shrimp doors. You know, if you ever seen shrimp doors, I'm painted them white with my grandfather, just a family business name on it. And,
If you want to taste some of the shrimp, come to Georgia. I'll be back in Georgia next week, and I've got some that I'll pull out that I've put up that came from these guys. They're really good.
And I buy my shrimp from that granddad, I mean, because I know they're fresh right off the boat.
Yes, sir.
I recommend calling, by the way. We are very, very day boat, ice boat. When we catch it, we're calling you, you're bringing an ice chest, you're getting a heads on from the river that day. So it's best to give us a call and maybe ask to be on the list. It's gonna be a long one, so.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us, shifting gears, can you share your Cumberland Island heritage?
Talk, cuz.
What is your question? I'm sorry.
Your experience of growing up on Cumberland Island. The Burbank family grew up on Cumberland Island. Can you share some experiences?
Okay, well, start off with the Burbanks, originally from here in Fernandina. They went to Cumberland Island. That was my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather went over there and built a trading post. And he actually sold goods, groceries and everything else to people over there. His son, our great-grandfather George, ran the pilot boat between Fernandina, Cumberland Island, Jekyll Island, up and down the coast and so forth. And they were there till well, right before the turn of the century and so forth. But they started off in Fernandina, and then our great-great-grandfather sold his property over on Cumberland Island. I wish he still had it. Even just a small portion of it. I wish.
Did he sell shrimp?
No, he was smarter than that. He was in real estate.
Y'all don't have any more questions, whatever, you want to come up and look through some more of these pictures or whatever, or ask more questions?